All right, so again, this is lesson 4. Just so you all know, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that I'm not going to cover. And what I mean is, they talk about in here how you can take the text that's in a button and how you can align it to the top or the bottom or the left or the right. Are you all with me here? I don't care. You can read that stuff if you want to. It may be important for whatever you're going to do for your project. I don't know. All right. The other thing is, just so you know, if you look in here, what we're going to concentrate most on for this chapter is about the last 10 pages, just so you know. All right. So this is called, it starts with designing for interactivity. Okay. Please look up on the screen here. And you can read this yourselves. I'm not going to read anything to you. But notice it does say, if you can read through that, the view class. You notice, remember how like when we do the set on click listener, how we type in new view V? A view, as it says, is the base class for everything you do in here. All right? And they say such as buttons. Yeah, you already know that. You've got the name of the button, all right, that you gave it in code, .set on click listener. Then you say new view. We call it V, but you can call it anything you want. But it's a view. All right. Now, this is the kind of thing they talk about in here, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody. But look at this. When designing an interactive app, make sure your app is intuitive. That is, your app should perform as users expect it to perform. What does that mean? That means, as an example, let's assume that you're creating an app for a shopping cart, and you decide that instead of a button with cart on it or whatever, that you want an image on your button that looks like a shopping cart. Then that just means that when you click that button, it should operate the same way as it would if it had the word cart on it. So as it says here, people like to press buttons. All right, somehow a big red button with a message that says do not press means the person will press it. All right? Yeah, I wouldn't even disagree with that at all. It says you use the button class to make a button. Buttons can have the following designs. Notice, just text, just an image, or both text and image. One thing please make sure of, because I've actually kind of been violating this, and that is you shouldn't put a ton of text on a button. You also shouldn't take a picture that is so intricate that it's very hard to see, because if you put it on a button, unless you're going to change the background color, it's going to be very hard to see. All right? As it says here, a button is normally a rectangle or a rounded rectangle, but it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of things you can do with this. So as it says right there, you can have what's called a raised button. And a raised button has more of a 3D effect to it. All right? You can have a flat button, which is pretty much what you were used to using. Notice that either way, they can be normal, disabled, or pressed. So they go through a big, long song and dance here on designing a raised button. And they say it's an outlined rectangle or a rounded rectangle that appears lifted from the screen. Again, more of a 3D look. But I'm not going to go through this. If you decide that when you do the app that you're going to create for your project, and you think, wow, that would look cool, then use them. Most people do like rounded buttons. They just like the way that they look when they've got the rounded look on the edges type of thing. All right, supposedly it's a little more pleasing to the eye. If you agree with that, then use it. If you don't agree with it, don't use it. Here they show you the 3 states. There's your normal state, there's the disabled state, and there's what it looks like when you're pressing it. All right, what's the difference? Well, when you're pressing it, you can see there's a little bit of a dark shadow around it. All right. So they give you how to create a raised button with text. They talk about how to create a raised button with an image. This is kind of important. If you would all please take a second to look up on the screen. It says here, choosing an icon. It says to choose images of a standard icon used for different displays, follow these steps. Again, please look on the screen. It says expand your app res and right-click the drawable folder and choose new image asset. And it brings this dialog up. All right? Why? Who cares? Okay? Well, it's important for a lot of reasons. As you make your way through this, here's the first one. If you look up on the screen, usually if you are creating an application and you want to send it to the App Store, quite often what you'll do is you will have 4 different icons representing your app. More or less tablet size, or down to or up to whatever, tablets down to phone size type of thing. All right? That's not that important. What is important, it says choose the action bar and the tab icons. Look on the screen, please. It'll bring up clip art, and the recommendation is rather than you creating your own art or grabbing it, if it's something that's standard, you use this. Do you have to? No. Am I going to take off if you don't do that? No. All right? But they're just certain standards that most people follow. All right? Now, it also says in here, this is kind of interesting, that you can choose vector or non-vector images. What's cool about using vector images, I'm on page 7, is vector images automatically scale. So as you're in an emulator or playing with, or you've got the tablets out and you're pinching to make it bigger and smaller, the size of the icon will scale based on the size of your screen. All right? So typically most people, for professional reasons, go with vector icons when possible. All right. Again, creating a raised button with only an icon. I'm not going to go through that. Flat buttons. All right, also known as a text button or a borderless button. A text-only button that looks flat and has no shadow. As it says, the main benefit is simplicity. It doesn't distract from the user. So the disadvantage is it's simpler, it's uglier, whatever you want to call it. All right. Responding to click events here. Page 11, an event listener is an interface in the view class that contains a single callback method. All right, the bottom line is this. You know both ways that you can add click events. You know both ways. You can manually go in and you can put it in here in the on-click event, for example, in your XML file, all right? Or you can use the set on-click listener. And no one trained me on how to do this. I never took a class in this is how you're supposed to be writing Android, etc. In fact, at the school I used to be at, I was kind of told right before Christmas break, hey, when you come back, you're going to be showing people intro to Android. All right? Fine. Well, so I spent a lot of my Christmas break looking at code. All right? The reason I'm telling you that is from what I can see, most professionals that are out there use the set on click listener. All right? That's why I've been using it most of the time. All right? Then they go through in here what happens when you do this. And basically, it's the set on click listener versus just writing your own, putting the on click inside of the XML file. And bottom line is the same thing is going to happen. You can do it either way. And they go through this in much detail. Okay? They also talk about a couple things in here, and I'm not going to spend much time on it. You know what on click is. Notice there's an on long click. You might have noticed that. You might have run some apps. You might have something with your phone where if you click something once, one thing happens. If you hold down on it for a few seconds, something else happens. All right? You can do the same kind of thing in any app that you create. You can have something for a click event, or an on-click event, or an on-long click event. All right? Notice that there's a touch routine. As it says, it handles any form of touch contact, including individuals or multiple touches. All right? Focus change, I don't think we need to talk about. We have already. All right, and there's an on key. As it says, it handles when a key or a hardware device is pressed while a view has the focus. Then they go into the clickable images. Okay? So again, they're talking in here about replacing typically, all right, they're talking about replacing the text on a button with an image. Now, I'm not going through this. Everybody listen, please. You don't have to look, but please listen. I'm not going through this. But I do assume that on a test, if you're asked to take one or more buttons and make them image buttons, that you can do that. Did everybody hear what I just said? All right. And it isn't hard. They go through the steps in here. All right. What we're going to get into next week. Anybody know what this is called? You ever see this? I'm going to make this smaller. You ever see that where you got something like that on the bottom? That's called a fab. And fab is it's an acronym, and it stands for Floating Action Button. That's what that is. All right. We're going to get into that. If not next week, then probably the week after that. Now, who cares? All right, what's the big deal? Well, notice if you look up on the screen here, everybody, please, just for a second, just want to show you this. I'm going to stop this project here. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to start a new one. All right? See this basic activity? Look on the screen. See this? If you choose basic activity instead of empty, you automatically get a fab. All right? So why am I showing you this? There is a reason. I'm going to click Next, and I'm just going to call this Fab. All right? I'm going to throw it onto my desktop, and it's called Fab. Okay. And finish. Please look up on the screen because this is different from what we've seen before. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to open up my main activity. All right? This is different from what you've seen before because the stuff that's in here you have not had. The stuff that I put up here on the screen that's blue is specific to having one of these fabs or, again, what's typically referred to as a floating action bar or floating action button, I should say. All right, and notice it says here, replace with your own action. So right now, if we look at this, this is what it looks like a little envelope. We can make it look like anything we want. All right, again, you will see this come next week. All right. So probably everything you ever wanted to know about a fab that I didn't go over is in there, or at least the stuff that's the most important. All right. Let's do this, then we'll take a break. Recognizing gestures, as it says here, a touch gesture occurs when a user places one or more fingers on a touch screen, and the app interprets it as a pattern of touches, such as a tap, a touch and hold, a fling. Do you all know what a fling is? I'm sure you all fling more than I do. You know, when you just do this kind of thing. All right. So, as it says there, If your app uses common gestures, you can take advantage of the gesture detector class. And you can check for one or more of these gestures. And again, they go through an example. To detect all types of gestures, you need to perform 2 steps. Gather data about touch events, interpret the data to see if it meets the criteria. One thing I'm not going to do, just so you know, when you take tests in here, I could probably go through these chapters and pull out the most obscure junk that was in there and test you on that. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take things, hopefully, that make you think about how to create the algorithm, and then as we go through these different chapters, how to add the additional functionality that we're going over. All right? So this would be the multiple gestures, as I said. Put it into a switch. All right, before we go on then and get into input controls, I'm up to page 24. It's 128. Let's take a break. Please come back at 1:45. All right? All right, just so you're aware of the way the chapter is set up, we've gone through the first 25 pages. I believe you've had enough initial exposure to buttons that the only thing we really haven't done is try to go and make a button that was an animated button. All right? So, tomorrow we'll do a couple programs as we start, and one of them will include an animated button, just so you can see how to do it. Everybody hear me? Now, what I'm going to do now, between now and a half an hour or so, is I'm going to go over the second section here on input controls. Look what's in here if you look up on the screen. There are checkboxes, radio buttons, spinners, toggle buttons, and switches. Those are the new things that are in here. So one of the programs that we do tomorrow will incorporate that stuff. I'm hoping that by tomorrow, by either doing 2 or maybe 3 fairly short programs, that will have hit everything that's in here. All right? After we do that tomorrow, then we're going to jump up, because this will take us to about page, I think it was 45 or something like that. We'll go over this, menus and pickers. All right? And we'll talk about different kinds of menus. Then on Tuesday, we don't meet next Monday. Remember, it's President's Day. On Tuesday of next week, we'll go through an example where we do 1 or more different kinds of menus. And then with the time that's left in the program, in the period rather, we'll look at user navigation. All right? We're not going to really do a program with user navigation, but last thing, if everybody look up on the screen, because to me, one of the most important parts of this chapter is the last 10 pages, and that's on recycler views. So by the time we get to Wednesday at the latest, we're going to build an application, and it's probably going to take a lot of the period to do this, all right, where we actually use a recycler view. All right, I know what I'm planning on doing. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not going to say anything. Just, you know, I know I'm not going to say we're going to do A, and then I try it and I can't get it to work. Well, then it's stupid. So by the time we get here by Wednesday of next week, I'll know whether or not it'll work. I don't think there's going to be any problem with it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about input controls. All right, please look up on the screen again here. I'm taking for granted that people know what an edit text is. I don't think that's really supposing a lot. Taking for granted you know what buttons are. We have looked at a seek bar that they show up on the screen here. We did that seek bar when we went through that tip calculator. We have not yet talked about checkboxes and radio buttons. All right. However, you have had both checkboxes and radio buttons in C#, and they work pretty much the same way in here. We have not talked about a switch, and if you look on the screen, that's exactly what it is. All right, everybody see this? And you probably, if you go to your settings on your phone, usually you'll find a lot of those switches on there. Wi-Fi on, Wi-Fi off, airplane mode on, airplane mode off, etc. All right? And then finally, the last one is a spinner. I think one of the things that we're going to do, I know you're all listening, even if you're not watching, one of the things I think we'll do next week is we will redo that calculator, and we will do it so we have a spinner or a drop down that has plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulo. Some of you already did it like that, so you may be a little bored when we get there. All right? So first, input controls for making choices. Again, I'm asking you this question. Am I right in assuming that everybody in this room understands what a checkbox is and understands what a radio button is? In many ways, a switch or a toggle button is like a radio button. It is or it isn't, that kind of an idea. All right? And the spinner, again, is like a drop down. All right. They talk in here, there's a little bit of talk about the differences between focusable and clickable. Notice it says here, I'm on the bottom of page 25, a focusable view is allowed to gain focus from a touch screen, external keyboard, etc. A clickable view is any view that reacts to being tapped or clicks. What does that mean? Well, think about it. An edit text is a focusable view. A button is a clickable view. Does that make sense to people? All right? It's just that they're using their Android terminology for stuff that we've been doing for the last year plus. They mention in here, and again, there's a lot of really good information in here, such as, it says, make sure when you're working on your program, do the following. Make it visually clear which view has the focus, so the user knows where the input goes. All right, have I violated that? Yeah. All right. Explicitly set the focus in your code to provide a path for users to navigate through. All right. Now it says using directional keys or a trackball. There are still people who use a trackball. All right. I don't know any, but I'm sure there are still some. All right. They give you some stuff in here, and just so you know this, do I have this up? Okay. If you look on the screen here, this actually might be something that you might want to use. You may or may not have noticed this when you look up here. If you look on the screen, see, for example, where this says layout. See that? If you click right there, it allows you to move to either one of your layouts. See this? If you go to res, it allows you to bring up different res files. There are a lot of shortcuts in the editor and on the editor screen I'm not going over because I'm more concerned with us understanding the language. And I figure you'll find your own way around sooner or later. All right, so checkboxes, again, as it says, using a set of checkboxes, you want the user to select any number of choices, 0 or more. Each checkbox is independent of the others. A user can select a checkbox that was already selected or clear it by clicking it again. All right. It used to be that when we showed these, we would show B, I, and U for bold, italicized, and underlined, but now most of the time when you see examples for checkboxes, they're not. All right. A lot of times it'll be for a checkbox. How do you want us to get a hold of you, for example? And you can have choose 0 or more, and it might be email, text, phone, etc. That's how you use checkboxes a lot today. And they show you. So please look on page 28 or look above. When you take your next test, you very well might have to make one or more checkboxes. So they show you how to set them up on page 28. Then afterwards on page 29, they show how you can react to whatever is or is not checked. Notice, again, this is why I like this thing, whatever we're using as a book here. On the bottom of page, or near the bottom of page 29, tip, to respond quickly to a checkbox, such as to display a message, like an alert to show a set of further options, you can use the Android onClick attribute in the XML layout for each checkbox option. All right? Many people today, depending on the app, want immediate feedback. This is one way you can provide it. All right. Unlike checkboxes, which are non-mutually exclusive, radio buttons, as mentioned here on the bottom of page 29, are mutually exclusive. So as it says there, choose a delivery method. All right. You probably have seen that if you've ever ordered anything from Amazon. Type of thing. What is your delivery option type of an idea. As it says, each radio button here is an instance of the radio button class. They're normally placed within a radio group in a layout. All right? Do they have to be? No, but it's usually easier to configure them and set them up so that they look more pleasing aesthetically if you set them up like that. So on page 30, they show you how you can add radio buttons into a radio button group. And on page 31, they show you how you can react to whatever radio button was selected. I mean, it can be something as simple as asking gender, if we suppose there are only 2. And, I mean, if I'm writing something like that for gender, I'm going to give 3 options. I'm just going to say male, female, female, male, whatever order you want first, and prefer not to answer. All right? Spinners, we've started talking about, but I gave you an assignment where I originally asked you to use one of these before we went over them in class. Spinners are good because if you understand how spinners work, it'll help a lot when we get to talking about list views next week. As it says, a spinner provides a quick way to select one value from a set. Please look on the screen. I believe it's still set up like that. In Android, when you've got a drop-down, you can only select one. You know how in C# you can have multi-select? I don't believe you can do that in Android. All right, I know it used to not be that way unless they've recently changed it. So as it says, here is an example. Which of these, this phone number here is for what? Homework, mobile, or other type of thing. So look at what you have to do to create the spinner. This is page 32. As it says here, you use the spinner class. It creates a view that displays an individual spinner. So it says follow this 3-step process. First, create the spinner element in your XML layout and specify its values using an array. You also have to use an array adapter. All right? Many, many years ago, I traveled with my wife. Now it's almost 30 years ago. We traveled to Colombia, South America to pick up my daughter. All right? One of the things that we were told was, your hair, like they told my wife, your hair dryer won't work there because they have different types of outlets, etc. So we bought an adapter. that could plug into a hairdryer, and the other end would plug into the wall. It's the same kind of an idea here. All right. And as it says, then you must define the selection callback for the spinner, update the activity that uses it to implement the adapter view.onItem selected listener. Please look on the screen. That's new. It's not what you do for a button. For a button, it was set on click listener. Here it's on item selected listener. All right. So they go through, the whole three-step process here. All right. They go through the whole process here, starting on the bottom of page 32. First, create the spinner element. Not very hard. All right. Number 2, add an adapter that fills the spinner list with values, as it says there on the bottom of page 32. An adapter is like a bridge, a go-between, whatever you want to call it, between two things that are otherwise incompatible. The adapter, as mentioned here, they show it pictorially on the top of page 33, takes the data set you've specified, we'll use an array, and it makes a view for each item in there. So if we have 5 different symbols, plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulo, our spinner, as they show on the picture here on page 33, where each one of these things is gray, will have one of those symbols in there. All right? So as it says, the spinner adapter class implements the adapter class. All right? And it allows you to define 2 different views. One that shows the data values in the spinner, and one that shows the data in the drop-down list when it's touched or clicked. All right, so as they mentioned here, the values you provide can come from any source, but must be provided through a spinner adapter like an array adapter. All right. Again, after you've done that, you implement the on-item selected listener interface in the activity. That's what they mentioned on page 33. All right. And again here on page 34, create the spinner and its adapter. Notice what it says here. All right. Again, I'm on page 34. Create the spinner and set its listener to the activity that implements the callback method. It says the best place to do this is after the activity layout is inflated. We're going to be seeing that word a lot, the word inflated. All right. So number 1, as it says here, instantiate a spinner in the onCreate method. All right. Specify the layout for the spinner choices. Add code to respond to the spinner selections. We'll do all of this stuff. All right. Also, for our calculator, and I think I gave you this already, when most of you use the buttons with it rather than using a spinner, but we want to make sure if you attempt to divide by 0 that the program does not blow up. So we'll have to add that code in there. They do explain, if you look here on the screen on page 35, on item selected is going to require 3 different parameters: a view, a position, and an ID. Notice that the ID is long. It's not impossible or inconceivable, depending on how you set this up. You could have hundreds, if not more, choices. As it says, for more information, see spinners. If you click right there, as always, it'll go to developer.android.com and give you more information. All right. Toggle buttons and switches. As it says, it lets you control a setting between on and off. All right. There's with buttons. Here it is with switches. All right. Again, as always, it depends on what you're doing. You might never use these, or you might use them a lot. You already saw that. I already mentioned to you about using settings on your phone. Maybe you're going to set up a game All right, maybe Christian's going to set up a game for his project, and he wants different settings. He wants things to be turned on and off. Maybe you want a night view. You ever notice that on your GPS when it goes into night view? All right. You could even set something like that up so that you could automatically go into that if that's what you wanted to do. All right. So they talk about how you can use a toggle button and make it respond on the bottom of page 36 and going on to page 37. Same kind of thing on 37 with a switch. All right. Always make sure if you're going to use something like a switch, don't suppose that everybody understands that turning it to the right is on and turning it to the left is off. All right. Okay. Text input, let's just buzz through this because we've already talked about this. Use the edit text class to get user input. As it says here, you can customize and edit text for user input. By default, the edit text allows multiple lines. Okay. You can also set it up just for a single line if that's what you want. Page 42, attributes for customizing an edit text view. I'm not going to read any of these. You can see them. All right. To use user input in your app, set the layout and code. You know how to do this. This is not new. We have been doing this virtually the entire semester. Customizing the keyboard. Well, you know if you set your input type, for instance, if you set your input type for an edit text and you set it to number decimal, it'll have all the numbers on it plus the period. All right, and that's what they're talking about here. If you set something up to an email type, it'll show you all the alphabetic and the numeric characters and the @ sign, etc. And they give you the ones that are here. I'm not going to run through all of them here on the middle of page 43. All right. This is something you may be interested in. If you look on the bottom of page 43, it says changing the action key in the keyboard. All right, it says the action key is the done or the return key. It says you can change it to something else, such as the send key. It says to use a send key and an action that dials a phone number, and they give you an example. So in other words, you want to kind of circumvent the way things usually work and make them work the way you want them to work. Not really recommended, but there may be a reason for doing that. All right, this is one way you can do that. All right, I think that's enough for today. So again, what we will do on Tuesday of next week is we will write 2 or 3 programs, okay, and they will be, by and large, will be pretty short, just to demonstrate these concepts that were in the first 44 pages that we have not talked about so far. After we do that, we will go over section 4.3, which is a long section. It's about 40 pages. So we'll do that. All right, I probably will have your next assignment too, that I'll be able to pass out then. All right? Questions? All right, the rest of the period then is yours. Again, please make sure, I will go right now and I will grab all of the flash drives and put them out here. But by the end of the period, either on the flash drive, put your resume app and your guess app, or put them out on GitHub and make sure you give me an invite, all right, for them. There's no other questions. Again, the rest of the period then is yours.